Hi, my name is Jack Amendolia and I work for a firm called Watson and Associates. We were hired to help the board with the school boundary review that they're conducting for all their schools in the city of Oshawa. There are a lot of schools involved and a lot of moving parts, and the school board thought it would be helpful to do some short videos for each school community to explain why the board is doing a citywide boundary review in Oshawa and how it might impact their school communities. Before we talk about any specific scenarios impacting St. Kateri Tekakwitha, I want to take a minute to talk about the process and then about why a school board might do a boundary review. The material that is being presented is based on options that the Board of Trustees agreed to have staff take to the community for input. These are not the final recommendations, but really are intended to provide potential options for your input and feedback. The committee, made up of various board staff, school principals, and a school council representative from each school, will review the feedback and then prepare final recommendations. Those recommendations will be brought back to all of Oshawa via virtual meeting on May 4th, 2023. So why does a school board do a school boundary review or an attendance area review? Well, there's a variety of reasons why a board might conduct a review. Right now, we're going to explore some of the main ones. One of the primary reasons is enrollment pressures, and that means when the enrollment at a school is significantly over what that school was built for. And a school board looks at boundary reviews or changing those boundaries as a way to try to alleviate that enrollment. Again, assuming there are schools close by or somewhat close by that can take that additional enrollment. The other reason why a board might consider a boundary review is when a new school opens. If that new school requires a new boundary and it impacts some of the existing schools, again, a boundary review may be necessary to determine what that new school's boundary will look like. Another reason is an enrollment imbalance, similar to the first point about enrollment pressures. The school board may have some schools that are significantly over capacity. They may have some schools that are under capacity, and they may need to just try to better balance or equalize enrollment for those various schools. And then the last one is program. So if a board has, for example, a French immersion program, and they are looking to either expand that program or offer it in a different way or change the boundaries of that program, that's another reason why a school board might do a boundary review. In the case of this review, and like I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, it's a citywide review, fairly complex, a lot of schools involved. And the other thing is that all of these things, all of these reasons about why a school board might do a boundary review are present in some form in the City of Oshawa review. So now we're going to get into looking at some of the enrollments. What this table is showing is the existing 2022 enrollments by school and by grade. So you have all the schools on the left column. In addition, you have OTG, which refers to the school capacities that I was just talking about. So the permanent bricks and mortar capacity of the school. This number does not include portables. And then you have the enrollments by grade for each of these schools. And then you have a utilization column. And the utilization is simply the school's enrollment relative to its capacity. And what we show here is all the elementary schools as well as all the secondary schools involved in this review. So on this table highlighted in red, you see your school's community's enrollment as well as capacity and as well as the utilization. So the school has a permanent capacity of 372. It currently has enrollment of just over 600, at least based on October 31st, 2022 enrollments, and that results in a utilization of 162%. So we can see by the numbers here that the school is well over the capacity that it was built for. And when we look at it in relation to some of the other schools in the city of Oshawa, we see that there's quite a variance. We see some schools that are just as high, or if not higher than St. Kateri. We see some schools that have surplus space. We see some schools that are at capacity. This next slide is similar to what we looked at on the slide previous, still looking at 2022 enrollments by school. But what we look at this slide is we actually divide out the regular track English program and the French immersion program. Right now in the city of Oshawa, the board offers French immersion at 3 of its elementary schools, and we refer to these as dual track elementary schools because they offer both the regular English program as well as the French immersion program. And right now that's at St. Christopher, at St. Kateri, Tekakwitha, and St. Thomas Aquinas. Based on these 2022 enrollments, there were about 537 French immersion elementary school students, representing about 11.5% of the total elementary enrollment in Oshawa. At St. Kateri, French immersion enrollment makes up about 41% of the school's enrollment. At St. Thomas, about 36%, and at St. Christopher, about 29%. This next slide looks at the school's boundaries in a visual way so we can understand what they are spatially, geographically, where each school is located in the city of Oshawa. And if you look at the top right corner in that pinkish color, you see your school's boundary denoted by that or inside that red highlighted circle. On this slide, we continue to look at the school boundaries, but what we've done here is just created a heat map. Anywhere you see hot colors, it's schools that are over capacity. Anywhere you see the cooler colors, it's schools that are at or below capacity. The scenarios considered for part of this review really fall into a few main categories. The first one is school boundary changes. So we're talking about a traditional school boundary change where we look at moving the line to either make the boundary larger or smaller. The second is grade structure changes. So the new approved Monsignor Paul Dwyer Secondary School has been approved as a grade 7 to 12 school. So as part of this review, the board is interested in hearing from the community about possibly which grade 7 and 8 from which schools should go to the new secondary school. And the third main part of this review had to deal with French immersion programming. As we talked about previously, there's currently 3 dual track French immersion schools. So we looked at a diverse set of options all the way from status quo, leaving it as it is, to 1 single track facility for the whole city, multiple single track facilities, combinations of single track and dual track. So really all options were considered. Next, we're going to move on and look at how some of these scenarios that we presented to the public actually impact St. Kateri Tekakwitha Catholic School. So the first couple deal with the French immersion I just spoke about. So the first option that deals specifically with this school and this school community is looking at 1 single track French immersion school. In the scenario, what we did was we considered the existing Paul Dwyer that will be vacant once the new secondary school is open. So that's what we consider as a possible vacant site that can be used as a single track French immersion facility and has the size and the capacity to fit all of the French immersion students for the city of Ottawa. So about 537 based on current enrollments would be at the new French immersion facility. And when we look at St. Kateri Tekakwitha's capacity and utilization, about 162% based on 2022 status quo numbers. And if the French immersion was removed, it would drop all the way down to just below capacity at 96% utilization. So pretty significant impact to enrollment and a big reduction in the utilization rate under this scenario. The second scenario dealing with the school is very similar to the first. It's still removing the French immersion program from St. Kateri, but in this case, it's looking at what I mentioned a little earlier as well. Instead of 1 single track facility for the entire city, looking at 2, really a north and a south facility. One of the things that was talked about, again, in discussions with committee and community was looking at Father Vanini as a possible vacant site that could be used as a north single track French immersion site. So again, under this scenario, when dealing specifically with Kateri Tekakwitha, very similar to what we talked about before, utilization rates again would drop to 96%, just like in the first option. The next option, we're going to move a little bit away from the French immersion and back to the other main focus area we spoke about, a grade 7 to 12 facility and examining which possible schools grade 7 and 8s can, from which elementary school grade 7 and 8s can leave and go to the secondary school. So again, in one of the options we looked through, or one of the scenarios, we looked at grade 7 and 8s from both St. John Bosco as well as St. Kateri, just the regular track grade 7 and 8s under this scenario. moving to Paul Dwyer. And again, we can look at utilization rates, 162% status quo. If we remove the grades 7 and 8, it would drop to 141%. So I hope everyone found this helpful in regard to what scenarios we're looking at, and more specifically how it impacts your school and your school communities. So just to summarize the implications for your community, option one and option two, very similar. We're moving approximately 250 French immersion students from Kateri, and it would become a regular track school. And then the 7 and 8 option, it would remove the regular track grade 7 and 8 options, sending them to the new approved Monsignor Paul Dwyer Secondary School. And I think important to note as well is that there's no reason that both of these options might be looked at in combination. To finish off tonight's presentation, I just want to talk a little bit about what we've heard so far from the Oshawa community. So we've had a couple of community level meetings. We've had some committee level meetings. We've had a couple of surveys that have gone out to the public, as well as feedback that can be provided to the board through a general email address. And from that feedback, there's a couple of things that are starting to come from it. One thing that we're starting to hear is that there seems to be a preference for single track French immersion programming. There seems to be a preference for two facilities in the city of Oshawa rather than one. When I want specifically with regard to single track French immersion programming. A lot of the feedback wants to see a reduction in this enrollment pressure that we spoke about. There is a concern or a consideration to try as much as we can to keep communities together. And the public also wants us to consider, with regard to any changes that might be made, what transportation implications there are, how long students might be on a bus for. When we look at one question that we were asked, or that we asked the community early on in the process, what are some of the initial issues you see with some of the existing conditions at your school? You can see that about 50%, a little bit over 50% of the responses are either enrollment pressures or too many portables. So I think there's a clear understanding in the community that there's schools that are operating above capacity, and that something needs to be done to deal with some of that enrollment pressure. And that's why the board is undergoing this boundary review. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video tonight. I hope you found it informative, but if there are any questions, we will continue to reach out to the community. A lot of information can be found on the board's website, and a couple of meetings coming up. Thank you.